The Governor of Guam says military activity on the island is ramping up at an unprecedented rate, and he wants assurances from the U.S. that disruptions will be minimal. But a former U.S. congressman representing Guam described the U.S. territory as a pawn in Washington's war games and expressed concerns about the risks of proposed missile testing, disruptions to people's lives, and its housing market. It's just another of a raft of issues Guamanians are facing, including a long-standing fight for radiation compensation over nuclear fallout from U.S. nuclear weapons testing in the nearby Marshall Islands, which was recently blocked by Congress. Elisha Foon has the story.
Haven't you asked too much of us already? And what else do we have to give? And why are we the first strike community for the United States?
Robert Underwood is a former U.S. congressman and current chair of the Pacific Center for Island Security.
And why do people talk as if ostensibly if war breaks out between China and the U.S., there'll be missiles exchanged, but most of the damage will be in places like Guam? Why do people talk like that? Who do they think we are as a people that they can so cavalierly? And I've heard these briefings. I've attended meetings where they do war games.
He says the U.S. military must own the consequences of their presence on Guam. Missile testing on your doorstep twice a year for the next decade could soon be a reality. The U.S. territory in the Pacific is not only a military base, but home for 170,000 people and a tourist destination for over 1 million Japanese and South Korean travellers. Robert Underwood says while most people there have a positive view of their military, they're now waking up to the fact that their daily lives are being disrupted.
Guam is simply thought of as a set piece in a grand chess game. But of course, in this set piece, there's a lot of people. They're being asked to not just sacrifice their land and disrupt their life, but are not being informed about it in a timely way in which they can either ameliorate or perhaps even change the plans.
The United States plans to build an integrated 360 missile defense system on the island, which Underwood says is similar to Israel's Iron Dome. Guam is the largest and southernmost of the Mariana Islands and the largest island in Micronesia, sitting north of Papua New Guinea. The island was fully colonized by Spain for 217 years until the Spanish-American War, when the United States took over in 1898. Guam's acting governor, Josh Tenario, says although it's now self-governing, the US takes full advantage of its geostrategic location.
Our island is blessed and burdened with our geography. I really do believe that our island, unfortunately, is going to be considered for use to advance either a military or an economic agenda of a foreign power. Unfortunately, I believe that's the case.
The U.S. Missile Agency gave Guam just 30 days to look through hundreds of pages worth of documents. Governor Tenario has called for a 60-day extension on submissions, concerned about potential disruptions. But so far, there's been no response.
There are private property owners whose access to their properties is going to be affected. And I'm hopeful that the Department of Defense can find an alternative. We'll let you know. I'm optimistic, though, that they will provide a response. Senior military officials have verbally acknowledged the concern, and it's my understanding that technical folks are reviewing the matter right now.
The U.S. Missile Agency has yet to respond to interview requests. Governor Tenario says he's hopeful they'll provide more time, but admits it's only just the beginning of a much bigger plan.
It's unprecedented, the amount of activity that is happening within a very condensed period of time. We identified that there is a risk to landowners and access to their properties, but for the bigger missile defense program, certainly there's going to be much more that we'll be looking through.
Underwood says the U.S. military are responsible for driving up prices in the housing market.
The average price of a home has gone up dramatically, and then there's anticipated another 40% growth in the military population over the next decade. What this means is it's a disruption to the housing market. 10% of the people of the island are now living in multiple family and multi-generational households because housing is at a premium.
As well as contending with the US military, Guamanians are also fighting Washington in another battle, nuclear compensation. Guam was exposed to nuclear fallout from Pacific nuclear testing in the nearby Marshall Islands from 1946 to 1958. Guam downwinders and survivors exposed to nuclear fallout are determined to continue advocating for compensation. Pacific Association of Radiation Survivors President and atomic veteran Robert Celestial has spent 23 years trying to convince Congress to provide compensation to no avail.
So the people of Guam have been suffering from cancers and other diseases, birth defects. It's quite painful, very painful, knowing that something had happened to you years ago, and then now you're reaping the consequences of what the U.S. Congress did to the people of Guam.
But $60 million has instead been invested by the United States in mitigating threats and testing weapons in the name of defense around Guam. US Congress has been approached for comment.
Our population over the last decade has been quite alarmed with the provocations and direct threats that have been made by the government of North Korea. We're also, of course, concerned with the military propaganda that the People's Republic of China had issued, which shows bombings of Andersen Air Force Base. Very much concerned with the recent developments, and especially in this last week between the Russians and the North Koreans.
Submissions for missile testing close July 5th, unless the US Missile Agency agrees to an extension. Come December, 100 US Marines will move to Guam from Japan's Okinawa, as the first of 4,000 members of the force set to be relocated under a long-agreed bilateral plan.